Hi, Misha here, and as promised, we are going to, well, we did at this point, take the new and limited production Israeli IWI Galil Ace-21, usually referred to as the Rock and Lock RNL variant, out to the range. Last time I did kind of a sneak peek video at the table. Now we're doing kind of a full thing. So with that, no further ado, let's show the first shots out of this here GAT. Alright, first shots out of the Galil Ace Rock and Lock version.
What do you think?
Not bad. No smooth shooting for as relatively short as it is.
It's got a lot of bark.
Yeah, it'll do. Now the Rock and Lock is new, but we've had this version since 2015. In military parlance, this is known as the Ace-21N, N for NATO, because it takes Stenag mags. Whereas, of course, our special version here takes Rock and Lock Galil mags. Now, we did not take this out this time, but it's been out this year and several times before. So let's review some previous shooting footage of this gun just to be fair. And then we're going to talk about the differences, why one might prefer the other, and at the end of the video I'm going to bestow the coveted sling. You guys know the rules with slings right here. A gun that has a sling on it means it's mine, or a keeper. So which one in the end will I keep? Will it be the standard version that takes standard mags, cheap, affordable, easy to find, or the special version here that also takes special, somewhat expensive, and quite hard to find mags? Well, we'll go through a few factors, including how they shoot, some design changes, and all that good stuff. But first, yeah, let's go back to the 21N and show you a little bit of range footage, just to be fair. Held open. Let's let the Ace stretch its legs. And she held open. If I can do it right. There we go. Alright, let's try the Ace Rock and Lock again. It really doesn't have any climb. Held open again.
Is it punchy?
No, not really.
Yeah, kind of smooth shooting.
Smoother than I thought, and very little climb, and pretty gentle recoil. Probably a lot of it has to do with the brace, the not stock. So now that we have shot both, let's just talk a little bit about why the Ace exists. So, especially the Ace that takes standard Galil mags. Let's go back to the early days. Here is my Galil ARM built by Hillbilly using an original IDF kit. Because this is a machined receiver and thus heavy, lightning cuts were added. Again, copied mostly from the Valmet, at least the one on this side is, the scooped out one. On the opposing side, There could be the same size lightning cut, or, as you more commonly encounter, there'll be a cutout for a scope mount here. Notice the hole. But it does double duty of saving weight. And finally, there is a third noteworthy cut on the underside here. Again, just to machine off a bit, save a little weight, because this was, well, this is designed for modern infantry, and if they could save weight, ounces equal pounds. Keep that in the back of your head as we move forward with this video, because it will be important when we compare the two Ace versions in just a minute. So the ARM, well, this was a culmination of a lot of work done in Israel, and we've done full history videos, but the Cliff's Notes version, they captured a lot of AKs during the 6 Days Wars and other things in the 60s, and they worked with Valmet in Finland. But this was a very early 223 gun. If you think about it, when the Galil was being developed, there were not very many 223s outside of the M16. And also, the political situation was a little different. In the 60s, Israel and the USA weren't all that terribly close, although that would, of course, change. So they were going at their own. It was a machined receiver gun, folding buttstock as standard, 18-inch and some change barrel, cold hammer forged, chrome lined, originally a 1 in 12 twist. And the original version meant for the infantry to replace the F and FAL had these boxy wood handguards, carry handle, bayonet lug, and folding light bipod. Now, a lot of people are more familiar with the Galil AR, which is essentially the same but without the bipod, the carry handle, all that. Really, the AR was an export model. The ARM was originally built for the IDF, for infantry use and mechanized. A shorter version known as the SAR, with a 13 and some change barrel and a slightly shortened gas system, was created for the Air Force, artillery, and tank crews. Kind of have as a PDW type gun. In the beginning, those were the two Galil variants. And the original Galil was approved for production in 71, fully adopted in 72, and the very first ones were handed to the IDF in April of 73. This is important because in October you had the Yom Kippur War. Only a few served then. But this is really where things changed with the USA. They'd already been on the uptick. The U.S. started giving, through the military foreign aid program, lots of guns to Israel between 75 and 80, M16s, some CAR-15s. So just as the Galil was coming in to use, the death knell was sounded for IDF use because they had Uncle Sugar to help them out. But IMI, having put quite a bit of energy and time into the gun, turned to the export market. And there they met a lot of success, especially in South America, and of course in South Africa. It was licensed produced as the R4 and R5 respectively for the ARM and SAR. And again, that AR version was made for mostly export, including to the USA. Ultimately, 25 nations, give or take, would use the Galil, and they would all use these rock and lock style mags, 35 round standard, 50 round extended capacity. But this is a big and heavy gun, and it really, kind of its last major use in Israel was in 1982 during the Lebanon War. After that, it was effectively pulled from service in most areas, being replaced by the M16 and CAR-15. Now, they would remain on tanks and other vehicles, including the artillery. Some in the Air Force would still use them. A few little things like that. But the M16 was king, and by the 90s, it was out of service. That is for the 18 and the 13-inch versions. That's where the Ace comes into play. This is an offspring of the Micro Galil, the MAR, the MAR. IMI started working on a further compact version, kind of based on the Mini Uzi, if you think about it, including looking at this rear sight. In fact, the early versions had the same barrel length of 7.8 inches, although they were firing 5.56. Ultimately, they would kind of settle on an 8.5-inch standard barrel, although there was an extended 11-inch barrel version of the mini, the micro Galil, and it went through several evolutions and changes because it wasn't an IDF mil-spec gun. And by this point, licensed production for the Galil was occurring in a few nations, including Colombia, at a factory known as Indamil. In the beginning, they just assembled guns from parts obtained from Israel, but as time went on, they made more and more parts in-house. And by 2006, Indamil in Colombia was pretty much making every single part in-house. And that's when they started to think about what to do here with the micro Galil. And this is where the Ace really comes in. Alright, as promised, keeping the history short, let's go back and show some range footage for both of these, and then we'll talk about how they are the same, how they're different, and again, which one you may or may not want, kind of pros and cons of each. Now we'll let Tanner try the Ace out.
It's a cool little gun.
What do you think compared to the other two?
You know, I actually think I like this one.
They are kind of neat. These two, they come apart, of course, the same, but I know people like to see disassemblies, so let's do it. Let's take our mag out first. You know it's empty. We also want to charge it. Typical AKS disassembly. Of course, this is longer in the back. If I can get this pulled off. I want to say that. Come on. And people worry about that rear sight losing. Yeah, as you see, it's quite tight. Now, looking back here, we've got a recoil spring, of course. We've got a buffer. We've got this rubber gasket. Kind of help it along. These come in very well oiled, internally and externally. Here is our carrier. We're going to look back at that in a second. Our gas tube comes right off. It does have a key spot in the back to mate up with the top cover. And here's our handguard unit. Like the micro, it's actually held on with a large screw in the front and then kind of dovetailed in the back, so you can take the whole unit off if you need to. Looking inside, pretty standard. Now, it is interesting to look at the bolt carrier unit. We have our typical AK bolt. It is a spring-loaded firing pin. Notice the scallops. And here's that carrier. Here's those very angular cuts you can very clearly see pulled out. Note that it does have this here. The little tail is still on the carrier. I like that. And on this side, you'll notice more angular cuts. It's actually a pretty light carrier, frankly. And this tiny piston is just great. And yes, you do want play in an AK piston. It's properly pinned in. And its travel inside the receiver is very smooth, like you'd expect from a machined receiver gun. Of course, I don't have my bolt in, so that was dumb, but oh well. And by the way, here's our FNC style dust cover. And of course it goes back together. The gas tube is held on with a little dovetail here. your AK bolt is pretty standard. It's funny that, see how smooth that is? Nice and smooth. That's actually why the buffer is kind of important. That's so short going in. Now, a trick that's pretty well known to get this to fit right, if I can do it here when it's not fighting me. Yeah, pull it forward. You don't want to really set it in. You want to kind of put it back. Now, it's not fully seated here. See? That's not going to hold it. It's actually quite tight. We want to pop it in low. Put this on. And use our #1 AK tool with a sling hooked on it. You get the raw, unfettered footage here. Rubber mallets are your friend when it comes to any Kalashnikov gun. And then, if it's going to cooperate, maybe, it'll stick out just like that. So you see it actually fits quite tight. Of course, as you work them, they get a little easier, but rubber mallet, good friend. All right, well, let's move on. Okay, so I lied a little bit more history. So Indemil, we gotta give credit, otherwise I don't. They really worked on maturing the micro Galil, which gave us the Ace. They modified about half the parts in the gun, and they changed about 12 steel parts or metal parts to polymer, introducing the changes we all know: the full-length top rail, this modular handguard system with removable panels, if this will do it. They always fight me when I don't want them to. Plastic. The, of course, kind of monolithic polymer lower frame, pistol grip, and redesigned trigger. Now, several versions have been made, and this seems to be a joint thing between IWI and Indemil. There are at least 9 major variants for military customers, because this was not designed for the IDF. They were using the Tavor X95 behind me there. So this was for export customers, so they did all kinds of things. They did, of course, 5.56 guns, 7.62x39 guns, which were popular and were adopted by Vietnam, and of course 7.62 NATO 308 guns. Going back to the 5.56 guns, they had a 1-in-7 twist rate as standard, and there was the 21, which took Galil Ace mags, and the 21N. And at least 15 countries have adopted the Ace, at least for special forces, police use. And that was kind of the original idea behind the micro Galil, was for police, SWAT teams, airborne paratroopers somewhat, to be compact and light. Compared to the full size you saw there, well, the ARM is 9.5 pounds, unloaded, no mag. And that gets us into our 2 versions here. This is the version we've seen in America to this point. Last round hold open with the release here. Take standard drop free AR mags, ambidextrous release. 8.5-inch barrel, 1/2 by 28 threads. The handguard we already talked about. Tritium sights. And the pistol version can be had, and usually is found, with the folding brace mechanism. Makes perfect sense to send this version here because it takes the STANAG mags. But in 2021, 500 and the more traditional Ace-21s were imported. Still Generation 1 style with the sights. Very similar gun with only a few differences. Still has the bolt hold open, as you know, but it uses rock and lock Galil mags. Now, why would they do this? Well, a lot of countries, like Colombia, for example, have a bunch of these mags in their inventory. And as I talked about in the first video, they're reverse compatible and forward compatible. This gun can use older Galil mags, and the newer Galil mags, steel mags here, will fit in older guns. The only difference, the bolt hold open will or won't work depending on the gun. And it's a very simple, elegant thing. There's this little nipple on the back of the follower. When it rises up, it trips this thing. And as you saw from the shooting clips, it held open every time, even using like Tula and stuff. So helps if you put it the right way. But it is rock and lock. It's a little iffy to get in there. I mean, it's not too bad, but frankly, the Stanag version is easier. And this would be for people more familiar with AK style controls. And it's interesting, the shelf the front of this rests on is pretty wide, and the catch is pretty generous, which means while it feeds fine, people have pointed out it does have a decent amount of play, but that's okay, it still feeds fine. This is really a consequence of having polymer lower and a steel upper working together to house the magazine. So very large mag catch. Another slight difference is the trigger. This is the Generation 1 trigger, but note how it has this swoop down trigger guard. This was done to make it for gloves, what have you, but what a lot of people find is their finger slips down and hits the edge of this, and they find that uncomfortable. With the rock and lock here, it's a straight cut, which means no real way to get your finger there. Now I'll take my mags out because it'll make my life easier. Say this is a better trigger overall compared to the original version. I am not sure I agree. The older one here might be slightly heavier and slightly grittier, but that could also just be perception, because if you expect to feel a better trigger, you feel one. I really think the major difference is the straight cut versus the larger rounded cut in the guard. Now I want to point out something to do with lightning cuts on these. How the earlier versions are a little more elegant than the newer versions, but then there's kind of an interesting finding we had when we threw them on the scales. So with our original earlier production version, you'll notice there's a interesting shape lightning cut on the left side that is mirrored on the right side, as is this very elegant and very deep scoop on the bolt carrier. That's actually taken from the micro Galil. Notice the very rounded edge on the carrier too. And there are also cuts kind of inside opposite these to the receiver. The walls are actually plenty thick, but they removed as much material as they could. When we look at the new rock and lock here, and this is something I think we'll kind of see going forward with all new Aces, Gen 2s and all that, they have gone to a slab side receiver. No cut here. It may not be at first apparent because of everything going on. It's kind of busy on this side. But when you flip it over to this side, it is certainly more apparent as a slab side here. And you'll notice the cut is different on the bolt carrier. It doesn't go as deep, although it does come back a little bit further. It's very close to the edge of the dust cover. And the edges have a very sharp angular cut to them. This shows that they've changed the machining process. And of course, internally, they've eliminated some of the cuts. It's more of a slab side. It does have some of the lightning cuts inside the receiver, but not all of them. So a little bit thicker walls up here. One other thing, and I pointed this out in the preview video while we're looking up close at the receivers, this is a 2-pin design here. That's what holds the brace block in. With the rock and lock here, it's more of a traditional Galil large single pin design. I found that change a little interesting. And it can be found on other IWI Aces as well. So okay, you would think since this has more lightning cuts in the receiver and a deeper one on the carrier, it would be lighter compared with this one. Plus this has a steel mag, 35 rounds. Now to be a little fair, I did put a HK steel mag in this one. But yeah, when we threw it on the scale, both of them weighed out with a mag, no ammunition in it of course, right at 8 pounds. Quite interesting. But it gets more interestinger when we take mags out. Please. When we do that, this one weighs 7 pounds 9 ounces as is. And this one weighs 7 pounds 5 ounces. So a 4-ounce difference. Even though this one has fewer lightning cuts, it's a lighter gun. I have to only assume that's because it has a smaller, lower frame, and also the angle cuts are more aggressive on the bolt carrier. So could be that, because everything else up front is the same. Oh, I found that kind of interesting. I assumed this one would be slightly heavier, especially with the heavier mag. This is definitely a heavier mag than this one in it, but no, that's not true. Well, I've been yabbering on here at the table long enough. We've got one kind of cool shooting clip where we're firing this at dusk with an 8.5-inch barrel, firing 5.56. Let's see how effective this flash adder is, how big of a fireball we can make, and then we'll come back for some final thoughts about which one might be right for you. Now let's try the flash adder with the Ace Rock and Lock. Well, needless to say, this was 100% reliable, and as you heard me kind of commenting while shooting, pretty nice on the recoil for the size and whatnot. I guess being a 8-pound gun helps. But of course the original version here has always been a reliable thing for us. So I'm kind of left with the same thoughts from the introduction video. There's really not a lot of difference. I will say that I do like that this has the lightning cuts, especially the scoop on the carrier. That just really reminds me of the micro Galil Damar. This one does seem a little more industrial, a little less elegant. To be fair though, the pre-ban Magnum Research and Action Arms Galils, they were slab side receivers too. So that's just something they do. What did surprise me is that this is lighter, but as I'm holding these together doing this video, yeah, I can feel it. And I do like, even if I don't really find the trigger all that different, I do like the trigger guard shape on this. And the magwell shape, I think, would appeal to more people of a traditional mindset. And that really is the only real difference, the magazines. If you are purely a shooter, being able to take Stanag mags, helps I have the right end of the gun, right? You ever grab them by the wrong end? Doesn't work well. It's ambidextrous, nice easy insert, a little bit of front to back play, reliable bolt hold open. I've always liked the placement of the bolt hold open control on these guns. And these are truly drop free, no issues there. The mags, are a little more fiddly to insert, but not bad, especially for anyone accustomed to an AK. And we do have a large control. Note how when the mag's not in, the control kicks back really far and kind of just moves forward to the point it locks in, kind of a self-adjusting system. But it too has the same release control. But of course these are not drop free, which, considering how relatively uncommon nice condition Galil mags are, that's probably not a bad thing. I will say, having worked with Galil mags for many years, when these are brand new, they work just fine. But if they get a dent, they can get problematic very quickly. But for a collector, for a purist, if you will, this would seem to be the authentic version of the Ace that definitely harkens more to its micro roots. And I think that's why IWI was smart in only bringing over 500. Now, some of which they brought over the 13-inch barrel pistol or even the 16-inch barrel rifle. I can understand that. But the 8.5-inch barrel guns are just kind of the easiest to bring over as pistols. And one benefit, they are going to be the lightest ones. So in the end, I really can't help you. If you like Galil mags and have them, this one does give you a little bit better trigger arrangement, and it is a little bit of a lighter weight gun. But on the other hand, I find the lightning cuts more elegant on this one, and of course this takes one of the most ubiquitous mags in the country. Quality is the same. Both have the folding brace. Both have a very high quality barrel. So which one gets the sling? Honestly, before the range trip, I was starting to lean towards the older one, for the reasons I pointed out. But after seeing how well it worked, gonna have to go with the new version, even though it's kind of the older version. Plus it does have that collectible cachet that probably the other would not. By the way, this is a IMI sling meant for the original micro or the Uzi. By the way, that hitch you're hearing or seeing, that's just the empty magazine, because these are brand new mags, and overcoming the hammer there. This one has a little bit of it too, right there. So that's not anything one way or the other. And just in case someone pointed it out. I honestly think this gun will serve more people better in the USA. But yeah, this gun is pretty unique for what it is. It's kind of funny to see an old school mag, a rock and lock mag, in such a modern-esque gun. And if you really want to go more classic, a micro Galil handguard can be subbed out, as even can a micro Galil top covering gas tube if you want to kind of delete the rail. That kind of defeats the purpose, I suppose. And it does work well with the arm race. Of course, you have your ambi safety and all that good stuff. As I said earlier, I promised you a video. Tried to be as thorough as possible. In the end, it's a personal choice. I think objectively, the original AR mag is probably better, but subjectively, which matters a lot with firearms, a lot of people are going to find the rock and lock version better, myself included. I think what tipped it over the edge for me, literally, is the fact that this one is a few ounces lighter, because before that they were neck and neck in my mind, both shooting very well. To me, an Ace, a micro Galil, the lighter the better. And again, it's not a light gun, so it really is noticeable that this is a lighter gun. So let me know what you think about either one. Do you like the looks of the original or the rock and lock? Do you have either one? What are your experiences? Hell, let's even talk about the Ace Gen 2s if you like. Not really my cup of tea, but happy to talk about them. But wanted to give you some range footage and talk about guns. You know, the ammo situation right now makes going to the range a little difficult, but we do what we can, and a lot of that has to do with our Patreon supporters donating. And speaking of, if you'd like to help support so we can get to the range, check out the link to our Patreon page. But if you can't, understand 2020, 2021 have been very trying years for us all. Just liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, all really help and are all greatly appreciated. With that, this is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon next time.